I found a woman crying at my son's grave. She was holding a baby. Her next words broke me. Hi everyone. Before we get into today's video, I need your help. We've noticed that the channel's reach has been dropping a bit, and one of the best ways you can support us is by subscribing. It's quick, free, and helps us keep bringing you new and interesting stories. Your support means the world to us, and together we can grow this channel. Thank you so much. Now let's get to today's story. I'm writing from a temporary account for obvious reasons, and I've changed some details to protect my anonymity. The October morning greeted me with a gray sky and the smell of decaying leaves. I walked the familiar path to the cemetery, counting my steps. 723 from the garden gate to the iron entrance, another 218 to the third row where, among crosses darkened by time, stood the bright marble headstone I had chosen 8 months ago. 8 months, 243 days, 5,832 hours. I had stopped counting the minutes weeks ago. It didn't make the pain any smaller. The wind rustled through the bare branches of oak trees lining the cemetery paths. Wet grass soaked through my shoes as I stepped off the gravel walkway. I didn't care. Physical discomfort had become background noise, something distant and unimportant compared to the hollow ache that had taken permanent residence in my chest. Daniel, my son, 26 years old. Gone. I carried fresh chrysanthemums, their yellow petals bright against my dark coat. His mother, my ex-wife Sarah, had brought white roses 3 days ago. I knew because I came here every morning, and I could track the decay of each flower, each tribute, each small gesture that pretended to mean something in the face of absolute loss. The headstone came into view between two aging monuments. I had memorized every letter carved into its surface. Daniel James Morrison, 1997. 2023, beloved son, beloved son. 2 words that felt both true and utterly insufficient. How do you summarize a life in granite in 2 words? How do you capture the boy who spent hours building elaborate Lego cities, who played guitar badly but enthusiastically, who argued with me about everything from politics to proper pizza toppings, who was stubborn and brilliant and frustratingly independent? You don't. You can't. The accident had been quick, they told me. A drunk driver running a red light at 60 miles per hour. Daniel's car crumpled like paper. He died at the scene. The other driver walked away with minor injuries and a manslaughter charge that would never, ever be enough. I was 50 feet away when I saw her. A woman stood at Daniel's grave. Young, maybe 25 or 26. Long dark hair fell past her shoulders, tangled by the wind. She wore a thin jacket inadequate for the cold morning, and her shoulders shook with sobs. But it was what she held in her arms that made me stop walking, made my heart stutter in my chest. A baby, an infant, wrapped in a blue blanket, tiny fist pressed against her chest as she rocked back and forth. My first thought was that she had made a mistake. The cemetery was large, plots looked similar. Perhaps she was looking for someone else. A brother, a father, a husband lost too soon. It happened sometimes. I had seen other mourners pause, confused, checking plot numbers against cemetery maps with trembling hands. But she wasn't checking anything. She was kneeling now, one hand pressed against Daniel's headstone, her lips moving in words I couldn't hear. The baby stirred in her arms, making soft noises that carried across the morning air. I moved forward slowly, my footsteps crunching on wet leaves. She didn't notice me at first. She was speaking to the stone, her voice breaking. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry I didn't come sooner. I was afraid. I didn't know what to say, how to explain. 20 feet away now, close enough to see her face. Pale, tear-streaked, younger than I had first thought. Early 20s, perhaps. She had the exhausted look of new motherhood, dark circles under red-rimmed eyes, hair that hadn't seen a brush in days, clothes wrinkled from sleepless nights. Miss? My voice came out rougher than intended. She jerked upright, nearly losing her balance. Her eyes went wide with shock, then something else. Recognition. Fear? Her grip tightened on the baby, protective and instinctive. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to. She started to back away. Wait. I held up a hand, gentler now. This is, this is my son's grave. Did you know, Daniel? The question hung between us. The wind picked up, scattering more leaves across the grass. The baby made a small sound, and she automatically began rocking again, the motion ingrained and automatic. She looked at me for a long moment, really looked at me, her eyes brown, deep brown, filled with fresh tears. "You're his father," she whispered. Not a question. A statement of recognition, of terrible understanding. "Yes, David Morrison. And you are?" "Emma. Emma Chen." Her voice was barely audible. Daniel and I." She couldn't finish the sentence. She looked down at the baby in her arms, then back at the headstone, then at me. Her face crumpled with grief so raw it was painful to witness. I waited. Years of being a father had taught me patience, had taught me that sometimes silence was the only way to let truth emerge. But my mind was racing. Emma Chen. Daniel had never mentioned anyone named Emma. In the months before his death, he had been distant, preoccupied. I had assumed it was work stress. He had just started at a new architecture firm, long hours, demanding projects. Had there been something else? Someone else? "Mr. Morrison," she said finally, her voice steadier now, as if she had made some internal decision. "I didn't know how to contact you. After what happened, I wanted to, but I was scared. And then..." She looked down at the baby again. "And then everything got more complicated. I don't understand." She took a shaky breath. The baby began to fuss, and she shifted him. I could see now it was a boy to her shoulder, patting his back with practiced gentleness. The tenderness of the gesture made something twist in my chest. "Daniel and I were together," she said quietly, "for almost 2 years. We met at a coffee shop near his office. I was finishing my master's degree in urban planning. We just connected. He was kind and funny and passionate about his work. We spent hours talking about sustainable architecture, about how to make cities more livable. He made me laugh. He made me feel..." She trailed off, swallowing hard. 2 years? I repeated, stunned. "But he never mentioned... We never met you." She nodded, fresh tears spilling down her cheeks. "I know. He wanted to tell you. He talked about it all the time. How he needed to introduce me to his family. How he was waiting for the right moment. But there was always something. Work was crazy, or the timing felt wrong, or what?" She met my eyes directly now, and in her gaze I saw something that made shame burn hot in my gut. "He was afraid you wouldn't approve, Mr. Morrison. He said you two had a difficult relationship, that you had certain expectations for his life, and he worried that I didn't fit into them." The words landed like physical blows. I thought back to my last real conversation with Daniel, 6 weeks before he died. We had argued about what? His career choices. I had thought he was wasting his talent at a small firm, when he could have been at a major company. I had pushed, the way I always pushed, thinking I was helping, thinking I was guiding him toward success. He had told me I didn't understand what mattered to him. I had told him he was being naive. We had parted angry. We always parted angry those last few years. "He loved you," Emma said softly, as if reading my thoughts. "He wanted your approval so badly. That's why he never brought me home. He thought you'd see me as a distraction from his career. And maybe..." She paused, and I saw her steel herself for what came next. "Maybe he was right. Maybe you would have." I wanted to deny it, wanted to say I would have welcomed anyone who made my son happy. But the truth was, like bile in my throat, I didn't know. The man I had been 8 months ago, the man who measured success in job titles and salaries, who had his son's life planned out like an architectural blueprint, would he have accepted this young woman with her unfinished degree and her obvious love for his son? I wasn't sure. And that uncertainty was its own kind of death. "I didn't know," I said finally, inadequately. "He never told me." "I know." Emma shifted the baby again. He was awake now, blinking up at the gray sky with dark eyes. "That's not why I'm telling you this now. I didn't come here to make you feel guilty. I came because..." She stopped, took another breath. This one sounded like it hurt. I came because you have a right to know. Daniel never got to meet his son, Mr. Morrison, but his son is here, and he deserves to know who his father was. The world tilted. His son, I repeated numbly. His son, she confirmed, her voice breaking. Noah. Noah Daniel Chen. He was born 3 months ago. Daniel died before I could tell him I was pregnant. I stared at the baby at Noah, and the ground seemed to dissolve beneath my feet. The tiny face, the dark wisps of hair, the shape of his eyes. Oh God, he looked like Daniel as a baby, in the photographs Sarah had kept in albums I hadn't looked at in years. The same serious expression, the same way his tiny mouth pursed, as if contemplating the mysteries of existence. My grandson. Daniel's son. The child my son never knew existed. When? I managed to ask. When did you find out? 2 weeks before the accident. I took the test on a Monday morning. I was terrified and excited and completely overwhelmed. I called Daniel at work, but he was in a meeting. I left a message asking him to come over that night, that I had something important to tell him. She was crying openly now, making no attempt to hide it. He texted back saying he had to work late on a deadline, but he'd come by that Friday. We'd have dinner, he said. Talk properly. I remember being frustrated, wanting to tell him immediately, but also thinking it would be better in person. So I waited. I waited 4 days to tell him he was going to be a father. And Friday was March 23rd, the date of the accident. 6:47 p.m., according to the police report I had memorized. Daniel had been driving to see Emma, to hear news that would have changed his life. To learn he was going to be a father. He never made it. I was waiting for him, Emma continued, her voice hollow. I had cooked his favorite meal Thai basil chicken. I had bought a little pair of baby shoes as a way to tell him. Stupid, tiny shoes. I kept checking my phone, wondering why he was late, and then... She didn't need to finish. I knew what came next. The police arriving, the impossible words. The way reality fractures when you learn someone you love is gone. Just gone, in the space between one heartbeat and the next. I couldn't... She struggled for words. I couldn't process it. I was grieving and pregnant and terrified. I went to the funeral, but I stood in the back. I couldn't face his family. Your family without Daniel there. I couldn't explain who I was, why I was sobbing like my heart was being torn out. So I left before anyone could ask. I tried to remember the funeral. Hundreds of people had come. Daniel had been well-liked, social in ways I never was. Faces had blurred together in my grief. Could Emma have been there? Had I walked past my son's pregnant girlfriend and never known? Why didn't you tell us? I asked, and heard the accusation in my tone, the anger that came from hurt. Why didn't you tell me I had a grandson? Because I was 23 years old and alone and terrified. Emma's voice rose, sharp with her own pain. Because Daniel was dead and I was pregnant and I didn't know how to do any of it. Because the one time Daniel mentioned me to you, you asked if he was letting his personal life distract him from his career. The words hit like a slap. I didn't remember that conversation, but I believed it happened. It sounded exactly like something I would have said. I wanted to tell you, Emma said more quietly. After Noah was born, I kept thinking I should. That you had a right to know. But every time I picked up the phone, I remembered what Daniel said. That you were a good man, but a hard man. That you showed love through expectations rather than acceptance. And I thought, what if you didn't want us? What if you saw Noah as proof that Daniel had gotten off track from the life you wanted for him? So you came here instead, to tell his grave what you couldn't tell me. She nodded. I've been coming for 3 months, every Tuesday morning when I know it will be quiet. I talk to him, tell him about Noah, how he has Daniel's eyebrows, how he fought sleep the same stubborn way Daniel described fighting bedtime as a kid. I tell him I'm sorry, that I'm trying to be a good mother, that I wish he was here. The baby Noah began to cry. Not the angry wail of hunger or discomfort, but a softer sound, as if he could sense his mother's distress. Emma automatically began swaying, murmuring soft reassurances, her maternal instinct taking over even as tears continued to fall. I watched them. This girl barely out of college. This tiny baby who carried my son's DNA, my son's legacy. They stood at Daniel's grave like pilgrims at a shrine, and I understood with devastating clarity how much I had missed. How much Daniel had kept from me because I had made myself someone who needed to be kept from. The man I had been, the man who valued achievement over connection, success over happiness, had created a wall between himself and his son. A wall so high that Daniel had hidden the most important parts of his life behind it. His love, his joy, his future. And now that future stood before me, crying in the cold October wind. "Can I?" My voice cracked. I tried again. "Can I hold him?" Emma froze. She looked at me with those exhausted, wary eyes, and I saw her weighing the question. Weighing me. Deciding if I was safe, if I could be trusted with this precious burden. After a moment that felt like an eternity, she nodded. She stepped closer, carefully transferring Noah into my arms. He was so light, so impossibly fragile. I hadn't held a baby since Daniel was an infant, and I had forgotten how they fit perfectly in the crook of your arm, how they instinctively turned toward warmth. Noah looked up at me with dark eyes. Daniel's eyes, and made a small sound. Not crying now, just observing. Taking in the face of a grandfather he didn't know he had. "Hi," I whispered, my voice thick. "Hi, Noah." And then I was crying. Great, shuddering sobs that I had held back for 8 months, that I had locked away because I was supposed to be strong, supposed to handle grief with dignity and restraint. But standing there with my grandson in my arms, with the physical proof of Daniel's love and life and continuation, something inside me broke open. All the things I hadn't said to Daniel. All the approval I had withheld, thinking there would be time later, thinking he needed to earn it first. All the moments I had chosen work over presence, criticism over encouragement, expectations over acceptance. "I'm sorry," I said to the baby, to Emma, to the headstone, to the ghost of my son. "I'm so sorry." Emma was crying too now. She reached out and put a hand on my arm, a small gesture of comfort, of shared grief, of connection across the chasm of loss. "He loved you," she said again. "Despite everything, he loved you. He used to tell me stories about when he was little, how you taught him to ride a bike, how you took him to baseball games, how you'd fall asleep together watching movies on Saturday afternoons. He remembered the good things, Mr. Morrison. He wanted to find his way back to them. But we had run out of time. There would be no reconciliation, no moment where I told Daniel I was proud of him regardless of his choices, that his happiness mattered more than my vision of his success. There would be no conversation where he introduced me to Emma, showed me pictures of the ultrasound, asked for advice about fatherhood. All of that had died on a March evening, crushed between metal and pavement. Except, not all of it. I looked down at Noah, at his tiny fingers grasping at air, at the way his expression shifted between sleep and wakefulness. Here was Daniel's continuation. Here was the chance he never got to be a father, to love without condition, to choose connection over achievement. Here was my chance too. "Emma," I said, slowly, carefully, knowing these next words would matter more than anything I had ever said. "I can't bring Daniel back. I can't undo the ways I failed him as a father. But," I swallowed hard, forcing myself to meet her eyes, "I would like to know my grandson, if you'll let me. I would like to be part of his life, not to take Daniel's place, no one could ever do that. But to be there. To tell him about his father, to make sure he knows Daniel was a good man who was loved, who loved you, who would have been an amazing father." Emma stared at me. I could see the war in her expression, hope fighting with caution, need fighting with fear. "I don't have expectations," I added quickly. "I won't try to control anything or push you into decisions you don't want. I just want to be a grandfather, if you'll let me. I want to know Noah. I want to help if I can." The silence stretched between us. In the distance, a crow cawed. The wind rustled through the cemetery trees. Noah made a small gurgling sound, and I instinctively adjusted my hold on him, remembering after all these years how to support his head, how to make him feel secure. Okay, Emma said finally, so quietly I almost missed it. Okay? She nodded, wiping at her eyes with the back of her hand. Okay, but slowly. I'm not ready to just jump into this. I need to know you're serious, that you won't disappear when it gets difficult or inconvenient. I won't, I promised. I swear to you, I won't. And you can't be the person Daniel was afraid of. You can't push Noah the way you pushed Daniel. You can't make him feel like he has to earn your love by meeting some standard. Each word was a deserved knife. I nodded, accepting the conditions, accepting the accountability. I'm learning, I said honestly. I'm trying to be different than I was. Losing Daniel, it taught me what matters. It's taught me that people matter more than achievements, that love matters more than pride. Emma studied me for another long moment. Then she reached out and gently touched Noah's cheek. He should know his grandfather, she said softly. He should know his father's family. Daniel would want that. We stood there in the cold morning, the three of us, united by grief and biology and fragile, tentative hope. Above us, the clouds began to break, letting through thin shafts of morning light. They illuminated the headstone, making the carved letters seem to glow. Daniel James Morrison. I looked at those words and made a silent promise to my son. I will do better with Noah than I did with you. I will love him without condition. I will show up. I will be present. I will be the grandfather, the man you deserve to have as a father. I can't fix the past, but I can try to honor your future. Emma took Noah back from me after a few more minutes. She needed to feed him, she said. Change him. Get him home before he got too cold. We exchanged phone numbers. Made tentative plans for me to visit in a few days, just for an hour, just to start building trust and connection. As she turned to leave, I called out, Emma? She looked back. Thank you for coming here today, for telling me, for giving me this chance. She managed a small, sad smile. Thank you for not being the person Daniel was afraid you were. Thank you for being willing to change. I watched them walk away, Emma with Noah tucked against her shoulder, making their way between headstones toward the cemetery entrance. My grandson. My second chance. When they disappeared from view, I turned back to Daniel's grave. I knelt down, pressing my palm against the cold marble, feeling the carved letters beneath my fingers. I met Emma, I said aloud. I met your son, our Noah. He's beautiful, Daniel. He looks just like you did as a baby. The wind picked up, scattering more leaves across the grass. In the rustling branches, I could almost hear my son's voice, almost feel his presence. I'm sorry I made you afraid to share your life with me. I'm sorry I valued the wrong things. But I promise you, I promise, I will love Noah the way I should have loved you. Without conditions, without expectations. Just love. The way you deserved all along. I stayed there for a long time, talking to my son, making promises to his memory, letting the grief and hope and regret and determination wash through me in waves. When I finally stood to leave, I placed the chrysanthemums at the base of the headstone. Their yellow petals were bright against the gray morning, a small spot of color in the autumn landscape. I had come to the cemetery expecting another morning of quiet grief, of routine mourning, of talking to stone because there was no one else left to talk to. Instead, I had found a future I never knew existed. A grandson carrying my son's name and face and legacy. A young woman trying to navigate single motherhood while grieving the love of her life. A chance to be better, to choose differently, to honor Daniel's memory by loving the family he never got to know. As I walked back through the cemetery gates, counting my steps in reverse, I felt something I hadn't felt in 8 months. Purpose, hope. A reason to become the man my son needed me to be, even if I was a generation too late. Daniel was gone. That pain would never fully heal, but Noah was here, and in his tiny hands, he held the future. A future I had been given the undeserved grace to be part of. I had come to say goodbye to the past. Instead, I had found tomorrow, crying in his mother's arms at my son's grave. 3 months later, I sat in Emma's small apartment, holding Noah while she took a desperately needed shower. He had grown so much already more alert, more responsive, beginning to smile and coo and grab at the world around him. "Your daddy would have loved this," I told him softly, gently bouncing him in my arms. "He would have been so good at this, so patient and kind and present in all the ways I wasn't." Noah looked at me with those serious dark eyes, and I could have sworn he understood. On Emma's refrigerator was a photograph of Daniel, taken 6 months before he died. He was laughing at something off camera, his whole face lit with joy. Emma said she talked to the photo every day, telling Daniel about his son, keeping him alive through stories and memory. I had started doing the same. Every Tuesday, Emma and Noah and I went to the cemetery together. We brought flowers, we talked to the headstone, we told Daniel about Noah's first smile, his improving sleep schedule, the way he loved bath time but hated having his diaper changed. We built a family from grief. It wasn't the family Daniel had imagined. It wasn't the life any of us had planned. But it was what we had. It was what remained. And in the space between loss and love, in the gap between who I had been and who I was becoming, I found something I had spent years overlooking. Grace. The grace to forgive myself. The grace to change. The grace to hold my grandson and whisper to him about his father. The good man who loved his mother, who would have moved mountains to be here, who lived on in stories and photographs, and the beautiful boy sleeping in my arms. "Your dad was remarkable," I told Noah, "and I'm going to make sure you know that. I'm going to tell you everything, the good and the complicated and the true. You're going to know exactly who Daniel James Morrison was." Through the bathroom door, I could hear Emma singing softly. In my arms, Noah's eyes began to close, his tiny body relaxing into sleep. Outside, autumn was giving way to winter. The leaves had fallen. The world had gone gray and cold. But in this small apartment holding my grandson while his mother found a moment of peace, I felt warmth. I felt hope. I felt for the first time in 8 months, like life might be worth living again. Not because the pain was gone, it would never be fully gone, but because in the midst of loss, I had found something precious, a second chance to get fatherhood right, even if the role was different this time. A chance to choose love over expectations, presence over achievement, connection over pride. Daniel had given me that chance, even in death, and I would spend the rest of my life making sure I deserved it.